Okay, so here is the last nice challenge project to kind of work on. So this one's a little bit difficult, mostly just because if you've never worked with Snort before, it can be a little challenging. One thing to note too is I was even having a little bit of problem with how they specifically want you to write the Snort rule. So I'm going to show you how to write it and how to get it to alert. It just probably won't get that green or that red X to turn into a green check mark, unfortunately for us, but that's okay. There's more than one right way to write a rule. But we can go over a few different ideas of kind of what to do. So first thing to kind of highlight is, in this given scenario, our managed service provider has discovered a exploit called Let Me Cry, which is executed via HTTP GET request. So essentially this is a target towards our website, which is our Joomla server. So that's our server that's hosting our production website, our e-commerce site. So fortunately, Ashley Steele here has put together what the general code, or kind of a string. Sorry, I had a cough there. A string of what basically the signature file of the Let Me Cry attack on the security desk computer. So that's the desktop that we're going to be working on. So we're going to need two machines here. We're going to need the desktop machine. And we're also going to need to be connecting on to our pfSense system as well. So what I like to do with this, just to kind of help me out a little bit, is I'll use, say, like the snipping tool, and I'll open up, take a snip of the primary things, and then I'll use the pen up here to basically just highlight and or circle the important things that I need to remember to do. So first thing is we want Snort to log any GET requests to prod Joomla that contain the malicious string. We want those attacks, anything that's going over the TCP port on port 80 towards prod Joomla. The alert message that reads Let Me Cry exploit. And we're only setting up alerts. We want Snort to send the alerts to the firewall system log, and that the hint there is that it can be done with a little checkbox somewhere. And we're also going to likely need to update pfSense as well, which is the actual firewall of that we're using, which will require a reboot of the system. So we have a couple things that we need to do. Now, other things to kind of note here as well is they say port 80 with prod Joomla as the destination. Now, here's kind of an interesting aspect of kind of what we look at, which is if we look at our network map, the important thing to kind of note here is that we have multiple different addresses that we're typically utilizing here. So on the firewall, our firewall is performing NAT for us. So our prod Joomla is at 172.16.10.100, but our public facing address is 172.31.2.2. So any traffic that's coming from, say, the internet that's going to prod Joomla, if it's asking for a website or for prod Joomla, this is utilizing a specific form of NAT called PAT, port address translation. Its destination IP address is still going to be 172.31.2.2. And then the firewall will do the conversion to the prod Joomla. And you can see we have multiple different interfaces that we can look at here as well. But that's the primary WAN port. So really, when we're saying that traffic is going to the prod Joomla, we're saying that that traffic is going to a destination of 172.31.2.2, because that's the public facing address that the rest of the internet is going to be asking for if they're asking for our e-commerce site. Hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have questions on it, please let me know. So let's take a look at a couple of things that we need to do. So we're going to start off with some basic things, and then I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about what Snort is, and then how to write those firewall rules. So first thing that we can look at is we can connect into our security desk and log in with our credentials, which is player 1 and password 123. And then you'll likely get this information that's going to pop up, a little panel. Make sure that you click on Use Default Config. If you don't, you're going to have a little bit of a hard time because you won't have a start menu, or it'll be a little harder to access a browser as well. So make sure when this pops up, click on Use Default Config. So now that we're connected up here, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be connecting up to the firewall, which is a pfSense firewall. Now, we can do that through a command line if you wanted, but I prefer utilizing the web client as well. So to look at our device again, we are currently down on the security desk machine, which is at 172.16.20.55, and then that's calling out to the firewall, so we're going to be connecting up to it via its gateway address, which is 172.16.20.250. So we'll open up a web browser here. Oops. Close too many tabs. And we'll go ahead and navigate to our address here. So 172.16.20.250. Just make sure, yep, the correct address. And then it will give you a not secure. Just click advanced, and we'll say add an exception, confirm our exception, and it'll bring us our login credentials. And then our login credentials for this are admin and password 123 again. And again, if you ever forget those credentials or anything like that, remember you can always find them underneath the challenge info right there. But that login information was also provided insecurely by our boss, Ricardo, there. So we'll go ahead and connect in. So this is pfSense. So this is basically the firewall that's actually configured. We're not going to be doing anything really for configuring the firewall. We're actually just going to be setting up Snort. So a couple things to note here is I'm going to walk through this as if it's my first time going through here. So let's assume that we want to go through and install Snort. So to do that, up in the top right hand corner are the options drop down menu. And we'll look at System. And Snort is an additional feature or tool that we can install into pfSense as a whole. So it doesn't come default. So we go to the package manager in order for us to install additional tools. And you can see one tool that's currently installed here is the OpenVM tools, that because we're running on an ESXi server for VMware essentially. This tool is basically installed to allow configuration to go back and forth between the two sides, or just some additional kind of support. So we look at our available packages, and one of the things that we want to do is we want to install Snort. So let's see if that package is available to us. It is. We're going to try and go ahead and click install and confirm, and let's see what happens. Oh, we get an error. So it says that it failed. It says current PKG repository has a new PHP major version. pfSense should be upgraded before installing any new package. Well, hey, if we look at our reminder here from Ashley, she says that we will need to update pfSense. So, in order to do that, we can go up to our virtual machine, and we're going to select the firewall on HTML5, and this is going to connect us into the actual firewall itself, as if we're in a command line. So it's going to ask us for a couple different options, but before that, a couple things that we can kind of point out is you can look and you can see what each interface is kind of configured towards, and also where they're specifically pointed. So we have EM1 is our WAN connection going out to our public facing side, so that's 172.31.2.2. Our production server, which is where prod Joomla is, which is EM0.3. And then our security side of things, which is on our network map down here. And then we also have our user space as well. So those are all of our user space is our security, and then the subscreen is our connection over to the screen subnet. So that tells us a little bit of where and what we need to kind of connect to. So that kind of gives a nice indication of where we should kind of write our rules as well. So if we want to write our rules, we might want to write them as if they're going to the correct subnet. So the correct subnet for us, which is the screened subnet, which is the 10.100 network range. So that's probably the interface that we're going to want to connect to, or at least write some rules for. But remember, NAT is also in play as well. So really what we want to kind of think about is where do we want to place our rule, and where do we want to be managing or inspecting traffic. And so again, there's more than one correct way to do this. When I did this the first time, I placed the rule to inspect at the public facing side of things, which works, but then we can also write the rule and place it on the screen subnet as well, which we will remember is EM0.1. So anyway, back to what we need to do. We need to put in a shell, or we need to update our device. So to update pfSense, we need to get into a shell. And so you can do that by hitting 8 and then pressing enter. And then the next thing that we need to do is we need to update pfSense. Now, if you don't know how to do this, and I didn't remember the command off the top of my head, Google's your great friend. I just went to Google and I typed in update pfSense through command line. And very first hit, it showed me the command that I needed, and that specific command is sudo pfSense, remember the capital S there, dash upgrade space dash D. And it'll go through and it will do our update. And so this will take a bit. It's going to go through the full update process, and then it's going to require a reboot, which you'll see right there. And so we'll say yes as well. And then it'll take some time to kind of go through and do the full update, and it will eventually bring it back to the that initial login screen of what you kind of saw. So I'm going to pause it here. We don't need to watch things update for X amount of time, so I'll pause and then I'll come back when it's all updated. Okay, so we're back. Everything's all updated and stuff. So yay. So that's it. That's all we have to do on the actual VM itself. On that specific, on this specific VM. So that's all we have to do right there. So if we go back over to our system over here, we'll refresh. We'll ask to resend. It's gonna say, hey, you sure you want to do this? Say, yep, that's fine. We'll resubmit. We will re-sign in. Now that we're all signed back in, we're going to go back and try and install Snort again. So again, options, service, system, package manager, available packages, and find Snort. And then we'll go ahead and install Snort. So this will again take a minute to go through and install. We don't really have to do anything besides just sit and twiddle your thumbs for a few minutes, and should get all installed. So again, I'm going to pause for a minute, just because we don't need to sit here and watch things get installed. Okay, Snort successfully installed. Awesome. So off we go. So now, if we want to actually configure Snort, we'll go back to our drop-down menu, and now this is now a service. So we're going to go to Services, scroll all the way down to Snort, and this is where we actually need to go through some general configuration of Snort. So right now, Snort's not configured. It's not monitoring anything. It's not doing anything. So we need to add an interface to say where Snort should be capturing traffic. So Snort is an intrusion detection and intrusion prevention system. It's a pretty cool tool. It's free. It's open source. It allows us to basically, there's tons of pre-written rules out there that we can go out and utilize. They're community-based rules. You can pay for Snort too if you want a little bit more direct rules that are placed. But it doesn't. You don't have to pay for it if you don't want to. And we can also write custom rules as well, which is what we're going to do on this one. So to start, we're going to add an interface that we want to monitor on. And now we have a couple options here. So the way I did it my first time, which is not incorrect, but it's just not the way that they want me to do it for this one, is I place the emulation on the WAN side because we have NAT, and it will gather and capture the information, and I monitored for any traffic going to the 172.31.2.2 on port 80. I'm going to try it a little bit of a different way, and let's put it on the interface that's going down towards our screen subnet, which is where prod Joomla is. So we're going to place this on the EM01. And it's set, and then our description here, we'll change this to match what we've set there. And then the next thing that we want to do is, remember, we want to set Snort to send alerts to the firewall system logs, and it's just a little checkbox. Well, hey, send alerts to system log. Looks like we need to check that box. So that's it. That's all you have to do when it comes to kind of the basic of configuring Snort. We'll click go, and then the next thing that we want to look at is now we actually have to write a rule for Snort, and this gets into the rules section right here, and we have to write a custom rule, and it's just a big old blank box. Oh boy. So here's how we look at Snort rules. So overall with Snort rules, oops, too much. When we're looking at a general rule, syntax-wise, this can be a little bit confusing, but it's not too bad. So here's an example rule of what we could be writing in Snort. And you're probably looking at this going, what are you showing me? That's a bunch of garbage. Close. It's what we have to look at. It's not really. But what we have to look at is how we break it down and how the general syntax and structure of a rule is kind of structured. And it's very similar in essence to, say, writing a firewall rule. So we say the very first thing that we want, which is our action that we want to take. So in this case, I want it to alert. That's the action I want it to do. We specify the protocol. So what protocol am I looking for? Is it TCP? Is it UDP? Is it ICMP? Is it IP? What is the overall protocol? What is the source IP address? So where is its traffic coming from? Is there a, if I wanted to, I could specify a source port. So in this case, they are specifying a source port. And then this caret here, or arrow, is the direction that we want to monitor the traffic. So this is this arrow says I want to monitor traffic coming from this source going to this destination. Now we could change that we could put in something like that, which would say I want to monitor all traffic going either way. I could also change it as well, so I could say that I want to monitor any traffic coming from this destination going to this source. So this is just a directional arrow that defines how I want to actually monitor the traffic, the flow of traffic that I want to monitor. So we have action, protocol, source IP, source port, direction to monitor. So what comes next? Destination IP address, followed by the destination port. And that's the general syntax. Those are the primary key things that we kind of look at when we're structuring and creating our network. Now, they're using variables here. They're predefined in Snort. You don't need to worry about them. We're going to be putting in actual addresses. In fact, one of the things that we can do if we really wanted to is our good friend, the keyword any, is available and useful for us, just like in writing a firewall rule. So the next thing that we kind of look at, and sorry if that's a little hard to see, but the second half of kind of what we look at here is the structure of the content and information that we have for how we're flagging specific traffic. So we have the message option, which says this is the message that's going to appear in the logs. And so it's going to say, in this case, in this example, it says backdoor sub 722. We can have flags, which defines different types of TCP flags. We don't need to worry about that. We can use the content option, which says match to a specific type of packet or binary data in the actual frame itself. We're going to need that. There are pipe signatures as well. We're not going to use the pipes. You can, but if you use the pipes, it says it needs to match to a very exact area. We're going to omit those pipes when we write our rule to make it a little easier. A reference lookup, so it says if you need to go look at additional information, you can put in, say, like a URL related to a specific information. We need an SID, and the SID number needs to be greater than 100. So anywhere from 0 to 100 is actually a reserved SID number, so you have to pick a higher number than 100 when you write an SID. This is just the rule identifier for when we kind of go through and write it. And that's kind of the primary things of what we look at. Now, there's a lot of additional aspects that we look at, but that's the general gist for what we kind of structure. So let's look at it kind of in the same lines of if we're writing a firewall rule, what we want it to do. So we know that we want this traffic to alert. So we're going to say alert. We know that the protocol that we want it to do is TCP, and we know that we want it to alert on port 80, and we know this is traffic coming from the internet, so we'll say alert TCP. We know it's coming from the internet, so our source address will be any. Our source port, because we don't know what it's going to be connecting to us on, will also be any. The direction we're trying to monitor this traffic to is any traffic coming from the internet going to our Joomla server. So that's the direction that we're going to be monitoring the flow. It's coming from the internet going to here. And then we're going to monitor the actual Joomla server traffic itself, or going to the Joomla server, which that IP address is 172.16.10.100. And again, just to verify, we can look at that and we can go, yep, prod Joomla is 172.16.10.100. They've told us it's port 80, so that's the destination port. And then the next part is where we actually want to kind of make our connection up. Now, I did link for you guys the Snort user manual. I do recommend that you go and take a closer look at this as well. In fact, if you're kind of scrolling through it and you're going, well, that's a lot of reading. Travis, I'm not reading almost 300 pages. Don't worry, you don't have to. What you need to scroll down to is scroll to chapter 3, which is writing snort rules, and we can look at, go to page 182. It's really 183 just because it's in a PDF viewer. But here it gives you a general structure of how to kind of write your rules. It gives you a better idea of what to do. So if you get lost or can't follow along, read the manual. That's how a lot of people in the industry have to do it. So when we look at it, we're going to be structuring it with a parentheses there, and we are going to be using the flag content. And remember, we want to flag for get requests. And then we're also going to be looking for the specific signature file that was provided to us as well, which is that let me cry. And we're going to open it in LeafPad. And so this is the specific signature that comes from the let me cry. And so we'll copy that. We'll paste it into the content flag. Close our quotes there, semicolon, and then we're going to add our message, which is with the MSG, and our flag is going to, our message that we'll log will be let me cry exploit, and then we're going to put an SID here of 101. And then we'll close our bracket. And so that should be it for our rule. And now, so we have our alert, the action we want to take, the protocol, source IP address, source port, direction we want to monitor, destination IP address, destination port, the content that should be flagged, so it's HTTP GET requests, the content signature, so the actual signature that comes from the let me cry attack, the message that will show up in our log file, let me cry exploit, and the SID to log it for. So then we go down, we click save, it'll pop up, it'll go, we're good to go. So now, if we go to alerts, we're going to say auto refresh, and now this might take a minute or two for it to kind of go through and to create logs for, but hopefully, crossing our fingers, it works. Oh, I forgot one very important thing, is once we've saved the rule, we do have to turn snort on. So make sure you go back to snort interfaces, and then there's a little press play button there. Make sure that you click play, and then it should actually start generating or capturing alerts as we go through. So hopefully that's kind of the structure of how to write it. That should be all you need in order to kind of go through and get it running. So while that's going through and it's trying to generate some alerts, we're also going to set this up the other way. This is the way that I originally set it up, and also does work. We're going to add another interface to gather information on, and this one is going to be the public address. We also are going to log traffic here. Click save. Go to our rules, and then same thing. We're going to alert TCP any, so it's still the same rule, but the only thing it's the exact same rule. The only thing that's changing here is we are going to be changing where that traffic is going to. And in this case, now because again NAT is occurring, we're pointing traffic towards our public address because that's where things are really going to be originally asking for. So we're just gonna go ahead and put in the rest of our information. So again, this is just the exact same thing that I put in the other rule itself. The only thing I changed is just the destination IP address. And just to make sure this is just a good practice, change the SID, so I just increased it by 1. Again, doesn't really matter because it's monitoring to a different area, but good to do anyway. So again, we'll go back, turn that one on, and then now we should be able to go to our alerts. And hey, one thing that's kind of interesting there is on our alert here, we can see that it's actually alerting and picking up traffic. So, yay! So that's good news. So, it is alerting, it is generating traffic, it's gathering the information, going to the correct area, and that works. If we look at the WAN side of the things as well, that will eventually generate some traffic. So both ways work, both ways are correct. It's just a matter of where do you want to capture the traffic as it's going through. So in this case, we just want it to capture it going towards a single specific system. So there it is. And yay, both check marks are green. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully you guys had a little bit better understanding about what Snort does or how it kind of works. If you have questions about it, please don't hesitate and feel free to reach out. Otherwise, hope you have a good rest of your week. Thanks. Bye.